The following content is provided under a Creative Commons license. Your support will help MIT OpenCourseWare continue to offer high-quality educational resources for free. To make a donation or view additional materials from hundreds of MIT courses, visit MIT OpenCourseWare at ocw.mit.edu.
So we're going to do a quick memory test. You will do it at your own seat. It's voluntary, but I will ask you to share a little bit of information. But this is for everybody now, not for one person to be put on the spot. So what I'm going to do is read you a list of words. Wait till the end, and when I say recall, write down the words from your memory. Okay? So I'll wait for a moment if you get a pencil or pen or something. Okay. I see a few people still getting stuff. Okay. All right. Ready? Here comes the word. So just listen. Don't write. That would be too easy, right? I'll say recall and then write them down. Here we go. Mailbox, sardine, shotgun, peacock, credit, detail, flicker, airline, spinach, clarinet, recall. Okay. Here are the answers. Okay. As you look at this list, put your hand up if you got all 10. 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2. Thank you. All right. So now think about this for a moment. We said 7 plus or minus 2. When the words are presented in a random, unorganized list like this, you're pretty much back to short-term memory limits in many senses. Not completely, but in many ways. So if you were to tell a person on the street, I have to say two things about you guys, which is certainly true and complimentary, okay? Most of you, if you're somewhere between 18 and 25, you're at your peak memory capacity for the rest of your life. You will never do better. You will never do better for rote learning than you are right now. There's a ton of research that shows that. You will never do better for rote learning than about 18 to 25, okay? After that, it's downhill, okay? You get other benefits. Salaries go up a little bit. You get authority. That's a nice one. But rote memory, you're at the top. Not only are you at the top, but you are an incredibly selected, academically achieving group, right? You're MIT undergraduates, right? You're incredibly selected to be the top of the top in many senses for learning between 18 to 25, as far as MIT can possibly figure this out, right? Okay? You are our hope for the future, right? If you guys can't fix global warming, we're in trouble, all right? So you can't get 10 words? Come on. We have big problems to solve, right? It's a capacity of the human mind that we just can't do about more than this, right? It's just amazing how limited rote memory is without other things. But there's a little bit more that we can tell. How many of you got mailbox and sardine? Fair number of hands? Okay. How many of you got spinach and clarinet? The last two words. Fair number of hands. How many of you got credit and detail? Way fewer hands. And that's what happens under a well-controlled experiment. So this is correct. High is correct. This is what order the word was in. The first word you heard, say the fifth. This experiment's 15 words. You can see that people are, here's their performance. Two things are noteworthy. People do best for the first couple of words, and sometimes they do best for the last couple of words. So here's 3 delays. These delays are 0 seconds what we did. You get the list, you immediately write them down and recall them verbally. That's 0, immediate. Or I wait 10 seconds and then say, now recall. Or I wait a half minute and say, now recall. Now for memory for the first 2 items, what's called a primacy effect, it doesn't matter. In all 3 conditions, those are the best 2 remembered words on average for most of the experiment. Okay? And people think that's a signature of long-term memory. You can get those 1 or 2 words, and then you start to get overwhelmed, okay, in long-term memory. Here, you only get the boost for the last couple of words if there's 0-second delay. If there's 10 seconds or 30 seconds delay, no boost. So people interpret this recency effect, superior memory for the last couple of words, as a signature of short-term memory that lasts only seconds. And so within a simple experiment, you can see long-term memory influences, short-term memory influences, and short-term is very short-term. It's just seconds. Now, Ebbinghaus is one of the founders of experimental studies of memory, and he was heroic. I mean, he would just train himself. He used nonsense syllables because he wanted to get rid of a lot of background stuff, rote memory. And he would learn thousands of these and then test himself and score himself honestly. Okay? He did the bulk of the work on himself, and he discovered something that's pretty simple, but that's has had a huge effect. So how well do you do since you learned something, all in long-term memory? If you're tested immediately, 100% of it's a small list and you studied a lot. 20 minutes later, an hour later, 9 hours later, you can see the steep forgetting up until about 10 hours, and then it sort of hangs in there. A forgetting curve of long-term memory that we, immediately afterwards we're pretty good. Then there's a lot of forgetting in 20 minutes and for a day, and then things hang in there. This shaped asymptotic curve of forgetting. Okay, now, here's another mission for you. You need a pencil, or just your fingers will work fine either way. You're going to see a list of words. Some will be in uppercase, some will be in lowercase. Capital letters, uppercase, okay. Your job as you see them from top to bottom is tap your left hand for each word that's in a capital letter and your right hand for each word that's a lowercase letter. Is that okay? So if the first word is capital, you tap left. If the second word is lowercase, you tap right. And you just tap, tap, tap until you get to the bottom, and then it will go. You ready? You ready to help me out? Here we go. Thank you very much. Here we go. Excellent. All right. What were the words? Okay. You might be impressed that even though they were right in front of you, and even though you were looking whether they were upper and lowercase, so you really saw them, if you don't bring the relevant background knowledge to remembering it, which is the meaning of words most of the time, our memory is pretty hideous. Okay? All right. Let's try another one. Now, the trick is gone a little bit, so we're going to do another, this is a little bit of a setup, but I can tell you it's scientifically true. Okay. So now it's the same idea. You're going to see words, but think about, you're going to read the word. If it's a living thing like a dog, tap the left hand. If it's a non-living thing like a chair, the right hand. Ready? You did awesome. Thanks. Here we go. Okay. Does it feel like you would remember the words better? Okay. Does it feel like you would? Okay. So here's what we did. The first list is you thought about the appearance of the word. In memory, that's called shallow encoding, just if it's upper or lowercase, and typically that leads to pretty poor memory. If you think about the meaning of the word, we think that optimizes memory. People call it deep encoding, and it leads to better memory. And in a well-controlled experiment, now here we had a certain order, and you knew there was a trick, but if you have a well-controlled experiment, here's what you find. If you just think about the appearance of the word, here's how well you do, pretty low, if you see the word once or twice. And if we look over here at the meaning of the word, you can see one thought about the meaning of the word is better than 2 presentations thinking about the appearance. And 2 thoughts about the meaning of the word, and your memory is really excellent. Yeah, question?
So if you're forced to think about get confused by the uppercase versus lowercase and the living versus non-living.
Was it confusing to do one than the other? It was a little bit, right? Yeah.
Is that supposed to make you remember it better? Do you have to think that hard?
No, usually, well, to the extent it draws you to think of, the question is the confusion of doing the 2 different tasks help you out? So roughly speaking, the answer is to the extent it draws your attention more to the word, yes. To the extent you're sitting there going, okay, was it uppercase or was it living? Or this is weirding me out. It's going to hurt you because your mind is filled with those thoughts, not looking at what's in front of you. Is that okay? Yeah. So, but we can do it, in these demonstrations, they're a little kludgy. Here's a fun one. The effective context. So this is how they did the experiment. You could do it different ways, but this is a fun one. They actually went in the United Kingdom to the shoreline, and they had people put on those old-style diving helmets, the old big helmets, and you go under the water with the big hose in front of you to your air source. And they had them learn word lists, like you were looking at word lists, on the land or underwater. So underwater, they're hearing the okay. And then they were tested for those on the land or in the water. And here's the core message was, you do better remembering information if you're tested in the same situation in which you learned it. So what we see here is if you, here's the words learned underwater, you're better if you're tested underwater instead of going on the land. If you learn the word on the land, you're better off if you're tested on the land than if you go underwater. The context in which you learn something helps you, right? Studying in the water, underwater and tested underwater, you do better than studying underwater and going on land, or vice versa. Being in the same room, same time of day, all those things help you a little bit to bring a memory back, because those are parts of the memory, is the context in which you experience it. Another approach that people have taken, this is about organization. They'll present a set of words like this, ask people to try to remember them. Pretty big list, you know. But if you take the same words and do that, same words people remember a lot better, because there's a organization that helps you, your background knowledge of what is a career, what is housework, what is food, all contribute to helping your memory for these items be better. So let's think about forgetting. We know something from last year, we forgot it. There's at least two ideas that people have said, what's the core reason we forget things? One of them is like passive. Well, I haven't used it for a while. It's just not available anymore because time has passed, not been used, not available. That's passive forgetting. The other way to think about why we forget is not that it's a passive loss of knowledge, but that experiences you have after that moment when you learn something will go back and write over and muddy and confuse your memory for the original event. It's active interference of subsequent experience. It's not passive withering. Other stuff is getting in your head that's writing over and modifying the original memory, and the original memory is never there again. And people have talked about it in two different directions that you can think about this. One of them is what they call proactive interference, where things from before mess up your learning on something, or retroactive interference. You already have the memory, and now new things mess you up and write over the memory. So memory is threatened by what came before the experience or what happens after the experience in the way that it interferes with accuracy of memory. So here's a fun experiment, just two subjects, but there's a lot of other studies that looked at this. This is the original demonstration, where people had to remember syllables, and they taught them the syllables just before they went to sleep or as they woke up. And then in each case, they were tested, for example, some number of hours later, let's say 8 hours later. And their idea in this study, and there's one wrinkle I'll mention now that we know things, their idea was, look, when you go to sleep, there's no retroactive interference because you're not learning anything else, you're not experiencing, you're not talking, you're not reading. So when you wake up in the morning, nothing has messed up your memory from when you just went to sleep. Does that make sense? If you study in the morning, now you go and you have your day, you go to classes, you talk to people, you read things, all those new experiences can go back and mess up the memory you acquired to start with. So in both cases, you get the memory to start with, but in one case, you're sleeping for 8 hours, it's not messed up. In the other case, you're out in the world, lots of new things are happening, they're retroactively messing up the memory. And I'll answer, let me just do the thing. And you can see the people who slept after they learned when they woke up did a lot better than the people who walked around during the day. And that's thought to be then a huge line of research saying that one of the reasons that memories become unavailable to us is not simply passive withering, but active other mental experiences that block, write over, and change the original memory. Question, yeah?
So if you study in the night and then go to sleep, does just having those memories hanging around in your brain strengthen them? Because you're going to wake up and do stuff.
Yeah, so now there's a second thing we now know. The question is there something good about going to sleep after studying? And the answer is there's a lot of evidence now in animals and increasingly in humans that sleep is a period that fixes memories from the prior day. And if you don't get the right kind of sleep or something like that, those memories from the prior day don't seem to get as well fixed into long-term memory. So this is mixing those two issues. These people have two advantages now, we think. One advantage they have is they're not having new experiences during the night that are messing up the memory they got, okay? And they're having this consolidation period during sleep. People have long studied, like, what's the use of sleep, okay, besides making you not sleepy? And one of the most fascinating things is, and there's just more and more evidence for this, is that it's a period where, because our brain is kind of quiet in many ways, it semes to work a lot on fixing memories from that day into a better long-term unit. Is that okay? So there's people at 2 advantages by our current understanding. So that's retroactive interference. Let me give you an example of proactive interference. And here's how they study it. We won't try it, but let me give you an example. They would have you hear 3 words like banana, peach, and apple. They're all related. Then they have you count aloud from 138 backward by 7s for a few moments. Okay? And they say, what were the words? And you give what you can. Then they give you plum, apricot, and lime, count backwards by 7s. Melon, lemon, grape. You can see all these are from the same category. And then they switch the category. So we said typically background knowledge helps. But here's the way it can get weirdly not helpful. So here's the performance of healthy young people doing this. So this is percent correct, good as high. The first list, they're really good. Okay, occasionally they forget one of the 3 words. But look what's happening as they go along for the second list and the third list. They're getting worse and worse. That's proactive interference. The experience in the first list is messing you up to learn the new information in the second list. And most of the errors people make are substitutions. They go plum, apricot, apple. Okay? By the third list, they're going melon, lime, apple. Okay? Because, you see what's happening? Because they're related. Now you're getting confused. If I heard the word grape recently, was that in the first group? I'm not reporting that one right now. It was in the one before that, or the one I'm supposed to report right now. The relations among them mess you up because it's hard to tell when you heard them, and they're all related. And just to convince you that it's true, because you might say, well, maybe you're just getting tired, like list and counting. Then they give you a new list, and look what happens. If it's fruits, you're still stuck. But if it's another list like vegetables, flowers, and meats, or professions, very different, your memory zooms right back up. Because all the interference you had here about fruits is no longer relevant for learning a set of professions. And it's kind of graded, right? We think of flowers as more related to fruits, kind of, and professions as very unrelated, doctor, lawyer, programmer, right? The more unrelated it is, the more your memory goes right back to where it was, because the proactive interference is no longer happening. Another thing that researchers have focused on is, as we read things, and what do we focus on? So here's an example where they read people's sentences, they actually saw sentences or read them, and then they tested them, and either for the meaning or for the style of the sentence. Now, usually when we read stuff, we're focused on the meaning, not the style, right? I mean, style, we might notice it, but usually we just, what am I reading? What's the point? Now, if they were warned that they would be tested, if they weren't unwarned, they read the sentence, then you're tested. Much better for meaning than for style, because we automatically go for meaning. That's what we go for when we read, by and large. When we think about poetry or something, that might be different, but reading typical text, what's the meaning? We strip away almost the style. We want to get to the content. But people are flexible, and they're terrible if they're asked about the style, the specific organization of the sentence, the word-by-word organization. But of course, if they focus on it, they can do a lot better. So this is just saying we naturally go for gist and meaning, and we try to throw away a lot of the specific particulars, like the way the sentence was organized, the style of the writing. Okay, so now I'd like to do a demonstration that will work better for some than others, but here we go, right? Here we go. I'm going to read you a list of words, and then I'm going to ask you for a couple different words and ask you if they were on the list, okay? Here we go, ready? Door, glass, pane, shade, ledge, sill, house, open, curtain, frame, view, breeze, sash, screen, sutter. Okay, was the word glass on the list? Okay. Was the word potato on the list? No. Was the word shade on the list? Was the word car on the list? Was the word window on the list? Okay, how many people said window? Come on, put your hands up. Come on. I heard a lot of window. I heard a lot of yes. All right, you're not helping me out here. Okay. Smart undergraduates like you, at the peak of your memory, will about half the time say yes to window. You saw this demonstration before, or you heard it before. The way they compose these lists is they ask students to say, what's the first word you think of that goes with door, the second word, and the first word that goes with door, the most common one they'll put over here. Okay, that's a trick word, the lure word. And then these are other words that people think kind of goes with the word door. So if you hear this list, and then either you're tested for, did you hear the word window or see the word window? It doesn't matter whether you see it or hear it. About half the time, undergraduates will say, yes, I heard it or saw it, because they're getting the gist of the list. This is all about door and window stuff, right? So when the word window appears, they have a false or illusory memory. The rate of false or illusory memories goes up with age as well. When you're, for every decade that will pass, you'll add a few more of those. Okay? But even undergraduates, typically about half the time, they'll falsely recall they heard the word window. Again, the idea is, here's this double-edged sword. Oh, you go, it's about words that go with doors and windows. So when you get, that's the gist, that's the main idea. When you get the word window, you falsely believe that you saw it or heard it. So that's the way that people try in the laboratory to create false memories that are experimentally testable. We'll talk about real-life ones just in a moment. So we said, all these things make it feel like memory is more the punch bowl metaphor than the camera, right? Because it's all swished together. The proactive stuff, the interpretation, the retroactive changes that are created in memory are all altering the memory based on the interpretation or based on subsequent experience. So let me stop for one moment to tell you, okay, so memory's shaky. Wouldn't it be cool to have truly photographic memory? I mean, that would be awesome as a student, right? Wouldn't be bad in life. There's only been one well-described case of a person who seems to have truly photographic memory. You hear various stories. Most of the people who are things like memory performers, or there's memory Olympics and things like that, they train the heck out of themselves to use different methods that can enhance your memory. And they can do amazing things, but it's all hard work, okay? It's all hard work as far as we understand it. But here's a guy who was different, studied by Luria, a psychologist in Russia, about 100 years ago. So this is a guy who was a reporter at a newspaper. And he would go out and come back and, type up the report of what he had seen at some event for the newspaper. And the editor noticed that this guy never took notes. Okay, he came back and he just started typing. And the editor said, you got to take notes because you won't know exactly what happened, who said what exactly. You'll make mistakes. The guy said, no, I'm always perfect. The editor said, okay, we're going to teach you a lesson about this just to show you. And he said, okay, he got some material and he said, everybody come around. He's going to embarrass the guy, right? I'm going to read you something. You tell me every word I said. He read him some gibberish, and the guy repeated every word perfectly. This guy truly had photographic memory. And kind of interestingly, when they said, wow, you have photographic memory, he didn't go, yes, I'm awesome. I'm a superhero, right? He said, doesn't everybody? All right? He was not aware that most of us don't remember every single thing that we study easily and for the rest of our lives. So he would be presented, rows of digits like these, study them for 3 minutes, and he could recall them days, weeks, and months later, perfectly. You could, okay. Truly, this is almost the only case we have well described and well analyzed, so it's really rare. He would say when he would have to think back of a particular list, oh, tell me the one from last year, or tell me the one from 2 years ago. He would have to think where he was and reinstate. So that in his mind's eye, he would see the room or hear the voice of the person reading it to him. But even 15 years later, perfect memory for a list like this. Wouldn't you like to have that, right now? I wouldn't mind it either. Okay. He also was synesthetic. That is, when he heard things in one modality, it triggered perception-like experiences in another modality. He could change his resting pulse from 70 to 100. He could change his temperature by 2 degrees by force of will. He's an unusual person, okay? I mean, we would love to discover another person like this on the face of the planet. We have not seen another one well documented. Probably there is, but they're sitting somewhere in some village, remembering everything perfectly, going, I thought you all remembered everything perfectly. So you could think, wow, that's awesome, nice superpower to have. But he was not a happy person. This is kind of an interesting question. Because he complained that when somebody spoke to him, like a family member, what would happen was he would be flooded by a word with some memory for some list or some event last week, last month, or 10 years ago. Okay? His family members said, you're not listening to me. Yeah, because every word or thing, brought back a flood of memory. He got so miserable that things in his environment would trigger perfect floods of memory into his mind. And this is truly like a novel, that he would, at one point, in order to get rid of memories, and this did not work, he wrote them down on a piece of paper and threw them into a fire, thinking somehow that would work. Okay, it didn't work. So this is one of these, Twilight Zone, O. Henry, depending, kinds of stories, right? Where you think it's awesome, to have photographic-like memory, but in fact it seems to have blocked in many ways his development as a person. He became, once he realized he was had such a rare memory, he became a professional memory performer, and then had all kinds of jobs, and finally retreated into countryside, kind of unhappy, treating people with herbs with his wife and son. Okay? So he did not have a happy, awesome life. Now, I don't know if in this world he would do better, because you could get on TV shows and become a celebrity or something if you could do this, right? So what's the problem with photographic-like memory, do you think? Why is it that we kind of wish we had it at certain moments, but what's the drawback? Well, the drawback seems to be, imagine if you had in your head a photograph of everything. You would have so much stuff, okay, that you wouldn't be analyzing it for the basic point of what it's about. So we just said the risk of analyzing things for their basic point, their basic gist, is that we want to get the bottom message, and we give up a lot of the particulars. It's not like a photograph. You know, it's like a very small abstract or a note about a photograph that's in your mind. But that's a very powerful way to approach the world, because then all your background knowledge is instantly available to help you interpret what's going on, because you're using lots of connections and very few particulars. Okay? Too many particulars are as burdensome as probably having too many generalities.